In the early 1700s, Quaker tobacco planters came to this area in search of new land to farm. Back then, Maryland was still a province under Lord Baltimore. Montgomery County was a part of Frederick County, and Sandy Spring was considered back country. This is the original Sandy Spring. Now located amid farm fields east of Norwood Road, this spring is the geographical center around which the community of Sandy Spring developed. But the heart and soul of Sandy Spring stems from the principles and traditions of its founders, the Quakers. Today, their influence can still be seen all around. This is the Sandy Spring Meeting House, a place of worship for the Sandy Spring Friends Society. Joy Schatz is a birthright Quaker and was married right here in the meeting house.
The meeting house was built in 1817. This is the fourth building that the meeting has had. The bricks were all made right here locally, and we had two stoves, one on each side of the building. The window panes, if you look at them, they're still the old-time glass. They're wavy. The benches were made locally also by Malin Chandler.
Quaker worship is a very personal experience. There is no minister, no music, and no prescribed service. But while worship is inward, community action is very different. Elizabeth Meyer is clerk of Sandy Spring Friends Meeting.
When we meet together to make any decisions, whether it's to build a meeting house or to accept a new member or to appoint committees or a clerk, we have to feel that we're in unity, that all of us are agreeing that this is God's will for the group. And so we don't vote. We discuss something and we see if there is a sense that everyone agrees that the decision is the way that God wants us to move. And if there is no unity, we cannot move on. But then when there's unity, then we make a decision.
Quakers have traditionally been involved in many social causes. They tend to be against war and involved in equal rights. Quakers in Sandy Spring supported the suffragettes. They were also some of the earliest to recognize civil rights.
Probably between 1780 and 1810, friends in this area in Montgomery County gradually freed their slaves. They weren't able to do it all at once. They had to make provisions for them. And in some cases, they gave them land that they could work or otherwise provide for them.
It is believed that the Friends provided stops for the Underground Railroad, allowing escaped slaves safe haven as they traveled to freedom. Education was and continues to be very important here in Sandy Spring. Over the years, there have been 15 Quaker schools in this area, some in private homes, others in school buildings. Friends even started the first school for African American children in 1866. Today, one Quaker school still endures. Sandy Spring Friends School sits on this 140-acre campus. Originally proposed as a high school by Brooke Moore in 1958, the school opened in 1961 with 77 students. Ken Smith is head of school.
It was strictly a boarding high school, and through the years it's evolved more and more into a day school, which it primarily is now. In 1980 they added a middle school, and in 1994 we merged with an elementary school, so we're now a pre-K through 12 school with a little over 500 students.
While only 12% of the students are Quaker, the school still maintains ties to its roots. The campus has a meeting house. This one was moved here from Ashton, where it was originally built in 1880. Today, all students come to meeting for worship, patterned after the Friends meeting.
I'll give you an example of something that happened one day. You could look out the window and it had started snowing, and some student stood up in Quaker manner of Quakers and said, "Oh, it's snowing outside, maybe we won't have school tomorrow," and sat back down. And then someone else, there's supposed to be a period of time between speaking, you don't just pop right up and say something, but a minute or so passed, someone else stood up and said, "You know, we're all excited about the snow and the possibility of no school tomorrow, but there are lots of people out there, they're homeless people that probably do not want it to snow tomorrow, and sat back down. So people reflected on that. And then someone else stood up a few minutes later and said, I've been thinking about the homeless people. Maybe we should have a blanket drive and take the blankets someplace, and sat back down. And then a few minutes later, a kid stood up and said, our homeroom will be responsible for getting the blankets down if everyone will bring into our homeroom tomorrow blankets.
The commitment to social action and education was a lifelong endeavor. For those reasons, associations were formed to share knowledge as well as friendship. In 1844, out of a need to improve agricultural techniques, the Farmers Club was formed. It and others like it still continue today.
In 1844, the Farmers Club started, and the women didn't want to be outdone, so they started their own group in 1857. And Mary Roberts got 2 or 3 of her friends together and for tea one day, and they started it. And we're the oldest continuously meeting women's group in the United States.
When we return, we'll take a look at how Sandy Spring grew and developed into the community we know today. Stay with us. The Quaker way of life embraced simplicity, frugality, and working for the good of the community. It was this combination of prudence and mutual concern that helped to build Sandy Spring. Quakers established businesses throughout the area, many of which are still prominent fixtures today. The original settlers of Sandy Spring were tobacco planters. They were the ones that cleared the land, tilled the soil, and began the community. One of the early families were the Stablers, whose farm was Harewood. Today, Stablers still work the land that surrounds the original family home. Drew Stabler is one of them.
All of the Stablers have been farmers, and I think I'm the 5th generation. My children are the 6th generation here that farmed right in this area. And the involvement has been from individual farms. Each one of them had a farm that they worked, and now the operation that I'm involved in is my brother and nephew and myself, family operation that's a lot larger. We rent a lot of land, and it's a much bigger operation as most agriculture has become. The farming operations are much larger than they used to be. But the Quaker influence is still there. We try to act kind of conservative in a lot of our approaches to what we do, but we try to keep up with the times also. We can't, or you get left behind.
Keeping up with the times was always important to these farmers. In the early 1800s, overplanting of tobacco depleted the soil around Sandy Spring, and it looked as though the farmers would have to move on. Instead, they banded together and experimented with different fertilizers, discovering guano as a solution. Innovation and working collectively didn't stop there. Retired postmaster of Sandy Spring, Bill Thomas, can trace his family's connection to this community back to the 1700s.
It was the mutual need in the community to provide protection for these Quaker farmers. Whether you needed specifically fire insurance, that was the most common, fire and casualty insurance, that the people in the neighborhood realized that there needed to be some sort of protection, and they banded together and formed a commercial endeavor, even though they were Quakers, non-business-like Quakers, but they realized the need for the community.
Answering a need, Edward Stabler founded the Mutual Fire Insurance Company in 1848. Its purpose was to offer fire and lightning insurance for the farmers. 20 years later, Edward's brother Caleb helped to start the Sandy Spring Savings Institution. Initially, it was housed within the insurance company.
There were a group of individuals in the community that felt that they needed some way to have savings, to protect people's savings, to be able to utilize the economic system to the best advantages of that time, which is in 1868. So they formed the Sandy Springs Savings Institution. The first day they were open, they took in $300 and some in accounts for savings accounts, and they paid more interest through their very astute investments, I guess, of the time. They were able to pay more interest on these savings than other banks in Baltimore, Frederick, and Washington. They were very few. Well, I guess it was the first savings institution in Montgomery County that was established just here.
Over the years, both of these businesses have grown into solid financial institutions. They each acknowledge their connections to the past.
The bank has fared very well. It's grown, it's got a lot more branches, it's a lot more services than it used to have. But the Quaker influence, the conservative approach, and the ability to help and be involved in the community, I think is still there and a very big part of it. The heritage is worth something, and gives us something to live up to and something to go towards.
That heritage is what helped to build the Sandy Spring we know today.
Although the Quakers were very conservative, very quiet, they still realized the need for business. Local businesses such as this insurance company, the bank, the fire department, the stores. There are so many stores, mercantile establishments here in the neighborhood, many of which also had a post office in the same building. And many of the Quakers, including many of my relatives, kept store and were able to provide a service again. So it was just sticking together. And as we've said many times, Sandy Spring is not a place, it's a state of mind.